Oh boy, Square Enix, they're in the headlines again. It does seem they're rather struggling. And if there's a trend in 2024, I think it's the largest publishers in our industry finally just reaching a tipping point where their failures are finally catching up with them, and they've kind of got to admit reality. So today is Square Enix. What's happened, right, is their leadership have basically looked at what they think is an aimless release schedule, massive Final Fantasy games with insane expectations, and an MMO division that has been left basically carrying the weight of the whole damn company, even in years with no expansions. Because, yeah, if there's not like major Creative Business Unit 3, Creative Studio 3, which is what they're now called, if they're not winning, if they're not doing great stuff, then actually the whole company kind of is in a bit of a pickle. It's real interesting. So, at a corporate level, they say they've had enough of this and they have a new plan, one that they hope will finally meet their famously absurd expectations. And I say famously absurd because Square Enix were always the people who are like, oh, we're very disappointed in this Tomb Raider game. It only sold 6 million copies or 5 million copies or whatever. It's very typical from them. When you look at how they release some of their games, it's like, lads, what the hell are you thinking? Like, that's just not going to work. This is going to be interesting. Fortunately, though, we don't have to huff ourselves on absurd expectations because of the support of viewers like you over at Bellular.games. Over there, number one, it's the best place to support what we do. It's also the best way to get our stuff without having to rely on stupid algorithms, and also, there's no ads. Of course, over there, you also get access to loading screen every single day into your inbox and all the other stuff that we do. And in honestly a time where, look, if I look at the AdSense graph for this channel, it's just like up, down, up, down, up, down. You cannot rely on it. You cannot do something that's got like proper viable job security. So this is an absolutely massive part in basically building an org, having a mission that will stand the test of time. So thank you for your support. That said, let's talk about Square Enix and their old plan that has not been working. And we really got a perfect example of it this week. So here it is. Kingdom Hearts series is coming to Steam on June 13th, and this is really good. Kingdom Hearts was on PC, but of course it was in the black hole called the Epic Games Store. It's going to be coming to Steam after 3 years, and a bit of change, of exclusivity. And based on producer statements at the time, the implication here is the only reason we've got Kingdom Hearts at all in PC is because Epic basically paid for the exclusivity and encouraged the port, as well as assisting them on the technical side. But obviously, for audiences, well, Kingdom Hearts just got thrown into a black hole that they never look at. Right? The destruction of information, maybe. And I think this is the kind of thing that just represents Square Enix's problem with selling games, where they just do stuff, they throw it at the wall, and they've got no plan. Because, yeah, Kingdom Hearts and PC should be a no-brainer, should be the sort of thing that could win. We're seeing big RPGs do well on PC all the time, but if you just yeet it into the Epic Games Store, nobody's really going to know. I just wonder how many people had no idea that this game could be played on PC because of Epic, right? And I think this is notable because this is one of the companies with the greatest back catalogs in all of gaming history, and those are games that have got very patchy availability on every platform. And when they do turn up, like with some of the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters or Chrono Trigger, well, you can have ports that are not handled fantastically. Meanwhile, in 2023, Square Enix have released 12 titles, and I'd say they've effectively marketed about 5 of them to audiences. We'll break that down, but it is kind of crazy. And Kingdom Hearts is just a perfect example of this lack of a clear plan. If Epic had not have offered exclusivity as a sort of motivational factor in the short term, would these games, would that have happened in PC whatsoever? Considering the rest of their library, it's absolutely not a given. And the fact that they were willing to take a short-term payday 3 years ago, that just says everything about Square Enix at the time. Not long-term strategy, just short-term paydays. And if you look through their history, the mangled development of so many games, be it Final Fantasy XIV originally, be it Final Fantasy XIII and the whole weird mishandling of that series. It's all been crazy, but it seems they're trying to tell their investors that they actually understand the problem. So let's get into that and their financial failures. Square Enix did not meet their goals for the last financial year. They were targeting sales of about 400 to 500 billion yen, which is about 2.6 to 3.2 billion US dollars. And they wanted an operating income of 60 to 75 billion yen, which is 384 to 480 million dollars. Right, so the key fact there is they wanted between 380 and 480 million USD. What they got was $208 million USD, which is basically like less than half of their top end prediction, which is pretty rough. And that shows a plan not working. And that is why the new CEO, Takashi Kiryu, has spent the last year apparently preparing to change things. So we're going to talk about that and at least what they're saying. And the new plan is, get ready for it, that they're going to deliver unforgettable experiences. Brave, bold, stunning, never heard of before, bit weird. I mean, when I saw that, my initial thought was, well, what the bloody hell does that mean? So let's talk about what that apparently means to them. In their premium games department, so not the mobile stuff, this means a shift from quantity to quality and delivering ensured fun. Basically, big games with long engagement tails and a focus on reflecting the desires of their creatives, but also, yes, making games that actually will make a profit. I think a funny example of that is a game like Harvestella, which is profoundly just a turbo 7 out of 10 game. Now, it just so happens that Matt on our team, he absolutely adored the game because through its jank, it was actually trying to do stuff. But Harvestella was a great example of a game that Square Enix made, for some reason, basically didn't market, and was never in any universe going to be a big financial success. One of those things where you just think, what? You're Square Enix. Why are you being silly? Surely you could have handled this better. The first thing that this means is they're retiring the creative business unit model of development, instead placing more of a focus on in-house development by teams under a more traditional project model led by key creatives. And of course, as outsiders, we'd always see Creative Business Unit 3 and think, man, that is a horrible name for a team of creative people making amazing experiences like Final Fantasy XIV, right? So that's been weird. They're changing it, but they haven't been creative in the change because now Creative Business Unit 3 has been renamed to Creative Studio 3. Not very creative, but anyway. Part of this will see these studios being led by distinct creatives and they will be given more authority. And that is why the leads for each studios are actually now being appointed as company directors. So, who are these people? Well, you've got Yoshinori Kitase, or Kitase, maybe. Sorry, I'm not amazing with names. So, he is Creative Studio 1 and 2, and he's been the director / supervisor or producer on every Final Fantasy, and also Chocobo GP. Chocobo GP, a very hilarious story from about 2 years ago. Of course, next we have got Naokai Ishida, of course, Yoshi P of Creative Business Unit 3. He is the only leader with no dual role, presumably because like FF14 is so important, like financially. So he's doing just Creative Studio 3. You then have Yusuke Saito, who is running Creative Studio 4 and 5. He's also got quite the history. I mean, executive producer on Nier, also Dragon Quest, the voice of the Card series, and Star Ocean. Broadly then, safe hands that have actually delivered things in the past, and apparently this is a showing that Square Enix are now going to be relying on their creative leadership to some extent. Maybe realizing, and I know this is a shocking thing, but games are a sort of creative medium, and yes, the business stuff is important, but the business stuff happens because the creative bit, the games, are good. I think it's that traditional thing about what do? Do you try to follow the numbers? And I think that leads to very boring games. Or do you try to make a game so good it creates new numbers, creates a new trend? Like as consumers, customers, maybe, that's what we want. Now, another part of this is real interesting. It is a multi-platform strategy, including Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, and PC for major franchises and AAA titles, including back catalog, but also Square Enix mobile titles coming to PC as well. And again, this just immediately lines up with the latest figures for 3 big titles. It's really interesting. And here's some real interesting analysis on that from Takashi Mochizuki of Bloomberg, right? Square Enix said FF16 sales fell short of expectations. So look at that, FF16. I mean, I know that there was a little bit of contention over, maybe linearity and aspects of the game's design, but for the people who loved it, they really did love it. Interesting that its sales fell short of expectations. Now, their actual momentum initially in that game was in line with expectations, but they actually missed their fiscal year goals because the momentum of its sales just slowed down, and we've actually had no updates from the company since they last gave figures of 3 million sales. So certainly, that's going to be rough. Also, he points out that FF7 Rebirth fell short of expectations. That was honestly kind of shocking to me. Now, he did say, initial momentum did not reach an internal target and no sales numbers have been shared. I can at least say I've known about FF7 Rebirth. I haven't massively seen it everywhere, and at the very least, I haven't seen much buzz about it. So, interesting. It kind of explains that. Then, of course, the biggest game of all time, Foam Stars. Foam Stars apparently fell short of expectations. The initial momentum didn't reach internal targets, and again, they have not shared sales numbers. So overall, it is a sobering analysis. Now, to be clear, he's not saying that these games are all doomed, right? He does say he thinks that FF16 can actually achieve its initially set out goals. He also thinks that the sales of Rebirth and Foam Stars aren't necessarily very bad. It's just obviously not amazing, and not to the degree where Square Enix are, touting their sales figures from the rooftops. To cover the rest of his analysis then, he points out that they've reorged into 5 console teams, 1 smartphone game team, that they have relied too much on an individual's creativity, will promote, and this is his word specifically, will promote sharing game making how among teams, and will seek best balance of individual creativity and organizational discipline. And I think that is a really strong bit of analysis. The idea of what Square Enix are saying is trusting key creatives and doing large projects that actually seem like they'll reasonably pull in a profit. What we've perhaps seen is, yes, they have leaned in creatives. As an example, Harvestella is a game that was never going to make a lot of money, and it was a janky game. It was a profound 7 out of 10. Even in Steam, which is where a 7 out of 10 can get a 95% score because it appeals to its niche specifically really well, Harvestella wasn't doing great. Yeah, Matt absolutely loves it. And the reason why he loves it is because he loves the creative vision of it. But I think you can see that's a game with maybe some strong creative vision, but overall, there was not the organizational discipline to maybe give Harvestella the resources it needed, or maybe the marketing that it needed. He also points out that Dragon Quest XII is under development, and that the investor reactions are to sell shares heavily, leading to the stocks falling to the day's trading limit, and that investors are basically worried that their dev pipeline is too empty, that they don't have big titles that can fix up their situation over the next couple of years. Kind of interesting stuff, right? And I think overall, we've always known that Square Enix have been egregiously forecasting sales for their games, to the point where it does seem like they're just giving themselves a poison chalice for later. Again, so many projects, even, say, the initial Tomb Raider game of those reboots, that game sold amazingly, millions and millions and millions of copies. Square Enix had absolutely ludicrous sales expectations. But even with that in mind, if we're in a situation where Final Fantasy Rebirth and 16 are failing to hit their goals, that is actually going to be a worrying thing. Now, this doesn't mean they failed outright, but it does mean that they're changing things up. Now, what do those 3 games share? The answer is PlayStation exclusivity, and that's what's interesting to me. Just like how I suppose Kingdom Hearts was buried by Epic Game Store exclusivity, just like how PlayStation exclusivity probably meant some nice beans up front. Clearly, they know that long-term sales are the important thing. And I guess FF16 is probably the clearest example of that, where, it performs at expectations initially, they're really happy about it, and then it just does not have the long tail. That's a game where PC, we believed was always going to be happening, but again, it's been a long-ass time. We still haven't actually got a concrete release date for the PC version of that game. Seems pretty clear what their plan is then, that they just want things more onto PC. Yes, I suppose also onto Xbox, but I mean, come on, we all know that Xbox is not massive in terms of its install base. And when you look at the strategy here, I really don't think they're looking at a Game Pass deal, because Game Pass deals have always been trading in your maximum potential for reliable money at the time of the deal being inked. Whereas here, I think what we're very clearly seeing is, taking those very reliable, nice upfront deals ultimately is robbing them, from their future. Now, even though the PlayStation angle is a big one with their biggest games, many have also pointed out that there are more Nintendo exclusives than PlayStation ones over the last 4 years. It's actually 9 against 6. But again, Harvestella and Paranormal Sight, those are not going to be as expensive as FF16, and they will not have as high sales expectations, which basically means they're less efficient games organizationally. They obviously did not have the overall organizational bandwidth to give those games the resources and the marketing that they deserved. So obviously that's going to mean less of those small games and more bigger games that will be sold in more places. I would absolutely expect day and date PS5 and Steam will be a goal for them. They know that the Epic Game Store thing didn't really pan out, and Epic, let's just say they've had to be more financially disciplined as of late, so I don't think they're going to be paying stupid amounts of money for PC exclusivity. And I think they're also likely realizing that, these exclusivity things are fine, but guess what you need? Lots of people interested in your brand, and those exclusivity deals, while they can be amazing for your finances in the short term, they do kind of to kind of cap how many people culturally will be interested in your game. Like in so many cases, the franchises that you've got great affinity to, those are based on the console you owned as a kid. I mean, hey, that's why Halo can still make me really sad. Now, you might be wondering, okay, this is all interesting, but those analysts and those shareholders may be right. Like, where are the big new games? Where is the funding to make all this happen? Well, let's talk about funding and how they found it. They found it in the form of restructuring their Western offices. This was first captured by Video Games Chronicle. The publishing, IT, and Square Enix collective groups will all see layoffs, with teams immediately seeing Slack access be limited following meetings where they were informed about things. And that is quite sad. I mean, Square Enix Collective has done some real good stuff. Hey, Power Wash Sim, that was them. So a bit rough them seeing layoffs, but you can see that if you're Square Enix, being a humongous zombified megacorp, that can be bad for efficiency. And yes, you can have wins with Square Enix Collective, but I've got to imagine that they're thinking, right, it's not worth the headache of bothering with so much of this stuff when we should be making the big Square Enix games that we are known for and putting those on every market that we can. But it is rough with Power Wash Sim, especially because it has appeared as a success story in their earnings reports. But of course, what are they doing in those earnings reports? They are highlighting facts that are going to make them look good. Now, it also does follow a very interesting pattern that is because of Japanese labor laws. They actually prohibit unrationalized layoffs, right? The ability to lay off staff rests mainly in the American-led offices, where people will presumably be let go immediately, and then the EU offices, where people will probably have a period of consultation and, better severance and that sort of thing. But basically what it is Square Enix cutting costs and consolidating. We already saw them actually divesting, of course, their big Western studios, right? Like, that was a pretty damn big move that they made. So overall, less output, more focus on directly managing the things that are coming out, still having a few eggs in their baskets, but it's a big basket with only a few eggs and a lot more focus. So that means games like Kingdom Hearts will probably have a plan for a PC port and will be available on a bigger storefront with like a larger audience. It probably means that FF, 17 might have a simultaneous release on PC and console. I mean, look, you see in Steam, if you are a big AAA company that can produce the numbers that Square Enix can, you're not losing 30% to Gabe. You're only losing 20%. And that is better than PlayStation, right? Because PlayStation is 70-30. But I believe it's if you have over 50 million in revenue, Steam cuts to 20%. So that's even just a very solid reason for them to take PC more seriously. That said, FF16 released in an absolute technical state, even though it was only launching on one platform. One GPU, one CPU, very specific optimization. My God, I think it would have been an utter shit show on PC. So I suppose there was technical reasons behind that. Anyway, that's the deal. Expect fewer things from Square Enix, but expect them to be bigger. And I suppose Square Enix to take them more seriously and to be a bit more strategic in how it structures its teams and releases its games. Will this mean that a few babies are tossed out with the bathwater? I think absolutely. You can look at Power Wash Sim, games like Harvestella that are maybe a diamond in the rough. At the end of the day, they don't want diamonds in the rough. They want diamonds that they can sell for a shitload of money, and that is the new plan. I think it does make sense if you're operating at their scale. Ultimately, it does sadden me a little bit, but I think that games like Harvestella, maybe that is the space that premium indies can do a better job of filling. Let me know, though, what are your thoughts on this? What are your experiences? Have you played FF16, and will you buy it on PC, on Steam? Do let me know. Have a great day. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you again tomorrow.